The government of Belize is making its position on sexual harassment in the workplace explicit with its Anti-Sexual Harassment Act. The drafting of the legislation was spearheaded by the Ministry of Human Development, headed by Minister Dolores Balderramos Garcia.
So basically now, we are putting a serious onus on the workplace and the employers who control that workplace to ensure that there is as little sexual harassment as possible, because Section 16 of the Act is saying that if the employer is aware and knows that there is sexual harassment taking place, he or she has a responsibility to mediate, to let it be known, and to take action. Then at that point, if you do absolutely nothing, there can be liability. You see, because we need to send the strong message that there must be zero tolerance of sexual harassment. And Paul, I can tell you, we hear reports within government, within organizations, within the private sector. It is real. Sexual harassment is real, and we have to send the strongest of messages that there needs to be accountability.
The United Nations defines sexual harassment as unwelcome verbal or physical advances and requests for sexual favors, especially when used as a term or condition for an individual's employment. The Anti-Sexual Harassment Act places significant emphasis on the workplace. The anti-sexual harassment legislation stipulates that an employer must make every reasonable effort to ensure that his or her employees are not sexually harassed in the course of their employment. One of the ways this is to be done is through the issuance of a policy statement in writing on prevention of sexual harassment. Employers must also ensure that they take the necessary steps to bring this policy statement to the attention of all employees. Employers and institutions are being afforded 12 months from the time the legislation is enacted to have such a policy in place.
We are saying that businesses must have an anti-sexual harassment policy. And the policy should be in writing, especially, again, for the bigger places.
What is this?
Not the Panades shop, but your big organizations, your organizations that have many employees. The organization that has the most employees in the entire country is the government of Belize. We have a huge amount of government workers. So government and ministries will have to have their written policy and to promulgate it and to make sure that people know about it so that we send the strong message.
A blueprint of the anti-sexual harassment policy required in every organization is outlined within the Act. The policy must speak to how an employer will deal with sexual harassment reports, disciplinary actions, the internal mechanisms to make such a complaint, and guidelines for confidentiality. The policy must also clearly state that the employee has a right to seek redress through conciliation or from the court. The bill was recently debated in the National Assembly with full support from its members.
It is a critically important bill in a society like ours, indeed in any society, but a society where far too often, and it's mostly male, there is sexual harassment.
While people do get sexually harassed, once you are hit with that stigma and accused with that, whether true or not, that is with you for life. And so it's also a serious thing to accuse somebody of it, and I think it must also be made aware that there should be penalties for making false accusations.
There has to be an intolerance to this type of thing. And so when it is identified, companies and organizations have a responsibility to act and ensure that they address that situation immediately. And again, that is an extremely good thing, because for far too long, I think that persons have suffered the indignities of harassment in many forms in this country.
Minister Garcia explained that before the legislation is enacted, a period of 2 weeks is being given for further comments and recommendations. And while the anti-sexual harassment bill places emphasis on the workplace, it also focuses on stomping out sexual harassment in institutions such as schools, detention facilities, and hospitals. There are also provisions that speak to landlords and their tenants. The legislation is described as comprehensive and far-reaching.
Sexual harassment is mostly against women, but also men are also sexually harassed. So we have to also take that into consideration. So this is something that protects everybody, both men, women, at home, in the workplace, in public, wherever it is. And in school, yes, exactly. In school, where a lot of times we get complaints from parents about the harassment of their children in school, mostly daughters, but children in general. We had a long discussion about this in cabinet, so it's not something that we just are passing just for passing, but we have to make sure that we can cover all the bases and that it is something that can work in Belize, it can work in the workplace, it can work in schools and wherever it is, to ensure that we can give the protection that our citizens need against sexual harassment.
Reporting for News 5, I am Paul Lopez.